I wanted to start today and talk a little bit before we jump into our conversation about immunity, integrity, and human design. I wanted to talk today a little bit about what's going on. I've been talking to my students and my clients all week, and universally, the thing that people keep saying to me is they feel tired. They are extraordinarily exhausted. And for those of you, especially those of you who have a lot of openness, or for my projectors especially, I think that some of this exhaustion is just a function of so much energy and so much unrest and fear and the unknown and, things moving really, really quickly. I mean, you think about it, we weren't here where we are this week, this Friday, last Friday. This is a very rapid change in our circumstances. And last year in the fall, if you've been watching the Quantum Alignment Show consistently, we talked a lot about transformation, and that transformation has three core phases. The first phase is disruption. That's when you take a step forward in your life and you get ready to put your foot down on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden the sidewalk isn't where it used to be, right? Or the rug gets pulled out from under you. And that is very much, what has happened to us this week. We've gone through this cataclysmic cycle of disruption. And what we see is that disruption, which is actually in the gate 51 in human design, which we're actually going to talk about a little bit today, disruption brings with it the promise to recalibrate and realign yourself, to bring you into a deeper harmony and alignment with your higher purpose, your spiritual self, and a deeper connection to source. When we go through a cycle of disruption, the second phase of what happens is we step into a phase that's called liminality, or I like to call it the void. Suddenly we're standing there, the sidewalk's not where it was, the rug got pulled out from under us, we're flat on our butts on the floor going, hey, what just happened? And it's a strange period, because all of a sudden who we were before, that identity no longer is sufficient, right? It doesn't define who we are. And we're sitting kind of in this unknown place. And if we don't have a tool to navigate our way through the void, two possible things can happen. Actually, three. The first thing is you could just descend into a pit of despair. And I think for some of us, we know that place very well, where you are riddled with anxiety and you feel powerless and disempowered and overwhelmed, and you just get stuck in the void. And certainly, in the newness of this transition, if you're in the, kind of feeling like what just happened, and you're in the shock and the awe of, oh my gosh, everything just suddenly changed, when you're in the void, it's a natural place to feel that way. It's a natural thing to feel that way. And I certainly would say for those of you who may be having that experience, it's okay. You're not failing spiritually or in any way. If in, Friday, day 5 in our captivity here, I'm being silly, if by day 5 of this experience, we're all kind of going, okay, what is going on? So let yourself have those feelings, but be mindful of the difference between experiencing the feelings versus getting scared. You start to find that you're not making a lot of progress through that emotional hole. Pay attention to what's going on. The second thing that can happen if we're not careful is when we go into the void, it's very easy, if you don't have a sense of who you are or who you'd like to be, or if you look at it in the metaphor of a map, if you don't know where your point B on your map is, it's very easy for us to slide back into the old way of doing things. Now, I think circumstances right now are pretty much dictating that we can't devolve to what has come before. We can't go back. But it's certainly going to be tempting, and I've heard people say to me all week, when are things going to get back to normal? I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be a normal the way there was a normal before. I think we'll have a new normal. But it's very easy when you go through the void to get re-triggered and try to go back to the way things were instead of going forward. The third thing that happens, and this is the good part, is that we begin to redefine the narrative, the story of who we are, and we begin to start steering the forces, our creative forces, towards moving into that new identity, that new possibility, that new definition of what is the new normal. And it is, by design, an expansive process. We are not designed to go through these kinds of limitations and then just shrink. These are, in fact, initiations that have the power to bring us back into harmony with what is truth and with our integrity, meaning our right place and the value of our right place in the cosmic plan. So with that in mind, as our sort of preamble to what we're going to talk about today, I want to invite you today to listen to today's Quantum Alignment show and to listen to it as an introduction to the possibility of using this time to deepen your connection to who you truly are, the true story of who you are, and think about what perhaps you need to do to bring yourself into greater harmony with that person. That is the truth of who you are. And recognize that that person, that is you, that real story of who you are, that definition is independent of any other external circumstance. You are who you are because you exist. And it's your existence that is the value. The fact that you exist is the value of your life. And that we may not be able to control certain external parameters around this circumstance in these situations. There are things we can't control. But we can always control our perspective and our attitude and our alignment with who we are. It doesn't make sense necessarily that that would be the answer to what we're going through. And I would say in the end, we're going to need to do more. We're going to have to do the work, so to speak, of building a new way of being in the world, a new perspective on how we want to create in the world. But for now, while we're in this pause, this collective pause, or I think I'm starting to think of it as a doing detox, while we're in this state that is probably the fantasy of every projector in the world, right? We're staying at home in our pajamas for the most part, resting and recalibrating, that while we take a pause this time, at this point, before we go into the next phase of our creative expression, that we use this as an opportunity to really get ourselves back to a deeper state of alignment with ourselves, our integrity, and who we truly are. Cindy, are the slides showing?
Yes, they are, and moving forward.
Things are working. All right, so welcome to today's show, Integrity, Health, and Human Design. We are going to focus primarily today on the will center. We're going to focus on the will center because it's the center where our personal identity lives, not our story, the whole expansiveness of who we are. That's the G center, but our ego resides here in this center. And this ego has a role of discovering how to become sustainable in the world, how to live true to itself, and as a result of living true to itself, tap into or have access to resources that you are then able ultimately to share with others. And I use the word share deliberately because there's an irony with the ego that I absolutely love. And that irony is that the will center, which is sometimes called the ego in human design, is deeply embedded in tribal circuitry. There are circuits in the human design chart, and we talked a little bit about circuitry last week. But there are three kinds of circuits. There's individual circuitry, which is the circuit that's here to bring change and transformation. There's tribal circuitry, which is the circuitry that's all about nurturing and caring and taking care of and sustaining the people you love and your community. And then there's collective circuitry, which is about the totality of humanity and how we choose to organize ourselves around the human story. Tribal circuitry is like super primal. It's that bone deep, soul deep, I'm going to die for you kind of energy, right? It's mama bear energy and papa bear energy. And it's that energy that holds true to our values and unifies us around common values. It's very much a circuitry that's about we. And yet here in this sort of final expression of the circuitry before we get up to the throat center through the 21 to the 45, we have this center, this human design center that's called the ego, that's all about me. What this says is that we are in integrity when we use the power of who we are ultimately to serve others. But there's a red flag on the play around here, because when we don't understand how to use this center in a healthy way, and I find that there's a lot of different permutations of how we can use this in an unhealthy way. But the biggest thing that I find, particularly in what I'll call the light worker community, people who are deeply caring and deeply compassionate and deeply open-hearted by nature, you guys, is that we don't really have a hard time with the we part. That's actually the part we get really well. We do that part super well. But what we oftentimes do is we discount the me part in the we so much. We are so terrified of our egos, or we say to us, it's like it's a spiritual slam to say to somebody, right? Oh, he's so in his ego, right? We say that. That's like an insult to a spiritual person. We discount sometimes the importance of the I in the we. And when we do that, that's actually a different way of being arrogant. Of course, there's arrogance in sort of the cape swooshing, me person. We all know that person, and we all think we don't want to be that person, right? But there's also arrogance in denying the value of who you are in the context of the whole. When we are not taking care of ourselves and martyring ourselves for others and not owning the value of what we need individually to stay sustainable, the bottom line of that is not only do we, of course, deplete ourselves and burn ourselves out and ultimately put ourselves in a situation where we might have to take resources from others because we can't provide for ourselves because we're too exhausted. The other part of that is we're not creating sustainably. And in a world that really wants from us, needs from us to create sustainably, we need to collectively be making decisions that ensure our sustainability. You can't be green or sustainable in life if you yourself are not sustainable. And so if we've overcared, if we've over-martyred ourselves to the point to where we've depleted ourselves and we haven't taken care of our own personal self, it limits what we're able to give to others, and it causes us to make reactionary choices that are not deliberate and not sustainable because we're sucking for oxygen. We're having that experience of feeling like we're drowning and we can't breathe, and so we're grabbing at whatever comes our way because we can't be deliberate because we're exhausted. The other circuitry that's connected to the center, one other channel here, is the 2551 or the 51 here, which is sometimes called the channel of the priestess or the channel of the shaman. This is a channel that is all about surrendering the personal self to a higher purpose. It is the place where the ego, the personal self, dies, metaphorically, not literally, dies to the higher purpose or the higher self. So there is a metaphor here about a shocking experience, the disruption that I talked about at the beginning, that spits you out into the void before you redefine who you are as the new improved version of yourself. That disruption piece comes in this 51. And from that 51, we get reconnected to source, the truth of who we are, and we begin to use our personal story ultimately to serve the greater good, to serve the heart of humanity. And so it's in our nature ultimately that our me is here to serve, but again, with not serving at a cost, not martyrdom, but serving in conjunction with making sure we take care of and sustain ourselves so that from our own place of sustainability, we can increase the sustainabilities of others. The will center is one of the 4 motors in the Human Design Center, so it's an energy source. And it's a really interesting energy source because it operates differently than the other, well, each of the motors operate differently, but the will center is very much like a bank. And this is true for us whether we have it defined or open. And in this part of the conversation, I'm really having a general dialogue about our will centers collectively. So openness and definition doesn't matter so much at this point. And when you think of this will center as being an energy bank, basically the way this functions is when we rest and we restore ourselves, when we live in alignment with who we really are, when we're in integrity, which I'll break down for us a little bit later, we actually put energy in the bank. So when you're living true to who you are, when you're doing what you love, or when you're contributing in a way that's sustainable and you're taking care of yourself, you're putting energy in your will center bank. Sometimes we draw on that energy, right? Because the will center, because it has the theme of sustainability, it also has the theme of enduring, being able to endure in it. It takes willpower, right, to get through a difficult situation. Or if you think about it in the context of agriculture and agricultural communities, you know, when you think about if the winter coming, you think about in agriculture, we have the harvest at the end of the autumn. We lay aside or we set aside what we've grown, right? And we miter it out and we measure it out over the course of the winter so that our resources last over time. And when we get to the end of the winter, we're like, oh my God, acorn squash again, bleh, right? We're all sick of it. It's the willpower energy that gives us the ability to endure eating the squash again. Or if you want to think of it in a strictly materialistic way, this is where money lives in the chart. So this is the will to stick to a budget so that over time you have the resources that'll take you on a vacation or sustain you during a pause cycle. So there's a certain amount of being able to regulate ourselves and to sustain ourselves from our ability to regulate ourselves that comes from will, and the energy to endure. And when we look at the connections in the will center, what we see is we're enduring the management of physical resources so that we have plenty. We are enduring the challenges in our relationships so that we don't just quit every time there's a challenge in our relationship. We stick with it. We keep working through the challenges in our community, in our family, in our tribes so that we stay together and bonded, even though, you know, living in close quarters with a bunch of people and not having a lot of freedom to go out and be at other people might put us at odds. We have the ability with our willpower to be able to hunker down and figure out a way to get along as we go through this process, right? The endurance and the endurability is here. But if we deplete the resources, if we don't measure our response, if we don't regulate ourselves, we don't nurture ourselves, we run the risk here of depleting the energy. And when we do, then we get ourselves into burnout. Is the center for material value, money, and resources, and willpower. It is the center associated with sustainability, as we talked about. It's the center associated with the heart, the stomach, the gallbladder, and most importantly, today we're going to talk about thymus. The thymus is the gland that is responsible for the process that creates white blood cells and immunity in your body. And what we see is that when we start to deplete our will center, we also tank our immune response. It is the center, especially when you have the center open, that teaches us about what's truly valuable in life. When we look at what's the source of the will center, where did it come from? And we see that in the 1780s, the heart chakra actually split into the G center and the will center, which sets us up actually for the shift that we're in right now. We're really in the middle of a big shift. And a lot of the themes of the shift that we've gone through have been themes that have been associated with the will center and the nature of how the will center functions and the metrics we use around the value of the will center and our perception and measurement of value is in a great state of flux as we move towards the shifting consciousness that we're knee deep in the middle of. When you have an open will center, you are oftentimes driven by a need to prove yourself. And what really happens is that you might find, if you have an open will center, that you've made a string of decisions about your life that have put you in a place where you have felt compelled to use what you've given to the world as a way of proving your value. So maybe let's learned that maybe you had the skill set or the gifts of being a good writer, and you wanted to be a writer, and everybody told you, oh, you can't do that. Nobody, writers don't make money. You'll never make money as a writer. Maybe from that, you made a decision to become a financial advisor, because obviously everybody values the money piece. Who cares about the writing piece? So you gave up that part of yourself to do something else to prove your value. The open will center, if you have an open will center, because you don't have the same quality of endurance, and that doesn't mean you can't commit. That doesn't mean you can't go to the gym. That doesn't mean you don't meditate every day. It just means that the way in which you engage in your relationship with your choices is going to be very different. You're going to be sure, you need to be sure that if you have the center open, that you enter into your relationships with everything you do correctly according to your strategy by human design type. When you do that, then you bring the energy on board, but you don't have will. Although you might try to push with will that you don't have, and that is in and of itself depleting. Just like anybody, all of us, all of humanity, defined will or not, we all have a need for rest. When the center is open, you won't hit a wall the same way a defined will can, but that doesn't mean you're not going to burn out, and it doesn't mean you don't also need cycles of rest and respite and restoration. Sometimes when you have an open will, there's a struggle for resources and money, because it's not necessarily the thing that comes to mind for you all the time, because this is a variable theme in your chart because it's open. The nature of how this chart, this aspect of the chart, the will center, works and what it means, this is all changing, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. If you have a defined ego or defined will center, I find that a lot of times when the open will center tends to discount their value and question their worth, I find that people with a defined will center have a little bit of a variation on that theme, that oftentimes if you have a defined will center, you're terrified of your ego. The voice of the will center is I. It speaks from the self. It speaks from the personal self. And people who have this defined often talk a lot with sentences that start with the word I this, I that, I this, I that. And you're supposed to. You, as a defined will center person, your story is a resource for others. You're supposed to tell the story of who you are. But if you are talking to people who question their own value, or if you are questioning your own value, that energy communicates, even if you're saying the right thing. The misalignment between how you feel about yourself and your language is perceived by others. And so people may have said to you, if you questioned your value or you questioned any aspect of who you are, what's the matter with you? All you do is talk about yourself. Or if you've been in a spiritual community and people have said, oh my God, you just come from your ego all the time, right? If you've had people say that to you, or that's been part of your experience, I find that people with a defined will center have an injury in their self-worth, because they have been told it's not okay for them to be who they are or to speak from the I of who they are. If you have a defined will center, you absolutely need cycles of rest. Your bank is very fixed and it's very finite, your energy bank here. And so if you have been drawing on, the credit line of your will center bank, and you've emptied that account and now your bank is empty, at a certain point with willpower, you can kind of push through the emptiness to a certain degree, but you really don't want to do that, because if you push through the emptiness with your willpower, you will only end up in a significantly deep burnout hole. You can push through exhaustion, but very finitely. And when the will center that is defined burns out, it's a big burnout. The other thing that happens with the defined will center is, because it carries an energy of empowerment, those of you who have a defined will center, and that's a small percentage of us, 7/8 of us have an open will center, 1/8 of us have a defined will center. And when you have a defined will center, when you speak and you talk, people feel empowered in your energy field. That's why if you go to like a seminar that's led by somebody with a defined will center and they're all pump you up, you can do this, I can do this, you can do this. That's kind of the message oftentimes of the defined will center. And you go home and like by Thursday, you're not following through on all that stuff you learned over the weekend, and you're not doing all the things you committed to doing, and you're feeling like, man, you suck because you have no willpower. This is probably true. And probably what was happening is you were floating on the wave of energy that you were amplifying from the leader. And that doesn't mean you suck. And it doesn't mean you can't follow through on whatever it is that you want to build or create for yourself. It means you got to do it differently. You can't will your way through it. You got to commit to it correctly according to your type. Because people with a defined will empower others, sometimes that gets misinterpreted. And if you're in a relationship with someone who's got a defined will, or you have a defined will, sometimes people get confused and they think when you say something that you've made a promise. So be very, very mindful of the language that you use so that you're not inadvertently causing somebody to think you made a promise when you didn't. As I said, it is the power to endure, but it's the power to endure that only happens when you regulate your usage of it, meaning you've got to have consistent cycles of rest. That's crucial. And certainly that is, to a certain degree, the blessing of where we are right now. We're kind of being forced to rest a little bit. So the will center is an artifact of the evolution of material consciousness. The last 400 years has been all about understanding the material world. We've had the Age of Enlightenment, we've had the Renaissance, we've had the scientific revolution. We've been on a drive as a species for the last 400 years to really understand the way in which our material world works. What we have seen as the hallmark of material consciousness is an understanding of the world that's very formulaic, that consists of finite amounts and solutions, fixed laws of probable, possible, and predictable results, formulas, reasoning, logic, nature, natural law, Darwin, right? You know that Darwin is the theory of evolution, is not the fact of evolution, and that in fact, nobody's actually really proved that a lot of what Darwin said was a theory. In fact, even Darwin said this is a fact, but we teach it as a fact because we want to understand how we got here so badly. We kind of make stuff up and teach it as facts, right? Because we have, as a result of material consciousness, this drive for certainty. It's very uncomfortable for human beings to sit in the unknown and go, I don't know why I'm here and how I got here, right? We want to have an answer. That's all part of material consciousness. This consciousness is about to shift. We have been certainly very actively shifting this consciousness, I would say, for the last 100+ years. And as our consciousness shifts, what we create and our understanding of the world shifts with us, and our outer world and our understanding of the world becomes a mirror to our evolution in consciousness. Before I go there, let me just say this. The currency of the materialistic era is material value, and in particular, it's been money. So up until this point in this era, one of the things we learned was, one of the metrics we've used to measure value has been material worth and material gain and money. That's changing. So around 100 or so years ago, we saw a new science kind of burst onto the scene, the science of quantum physics, which around 1920 became recognized as an official branch of science. Quantum physics is the science that's all about exploring the building blocks of matter, the building blocks of the material world. And what quantum scientists started to see was that atoms and atomic particles and subatomic particles actually behave very differently than matter itself. And that if that was actually true, that the building blocks of matter acted differently than matter itself, that maybe the way in which we understood matter and how matter behaves isn't actually valid, that maybe our understanding of the material world needed to have a big shift. And certainly quantum physics has been bringing this big change in understanding of materiality into our world and into the way in which we understand the world. The bottom line, the most important piece that quantum physics has brought to us is an understanding that the way in which we see the world and the expectations that we have around the world influences how the world around us behaves. Now, this is a big idea that gave birth to the philosophy of our thoughts create our reality, which, by the way, is a really gross oversimplification of how we actually create, but it's a good start. And it's certainly a start that as quantum physics emerged onto the scene, we saw hand in hand with that a new thought movement. We saw thought leaders like Ernest Holmes, Edgar Cayce, Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner, Maria Montessori. We saw the founding of Unity Church, which is a new thought church. We saw Science of Mind. We had and Napoleon Hill write the book Think and Grow Rich, right? We really began to look at, hey, our thoughts create our reality, or at least our experience of reality. We learned that we're all connected by virtue of the quantum field, that we create non-locally, that how we are right now can influence people that we're not even having contact with. If you're happy in your house right now, you're increasing your neighbor's possibility of experiencing happiness by 60%, even if you never talk to them, because happiness is a frequency of energy that's contagious, that spreads, and we can create and we can influence the world with our vibration. We discovered that we have the ability through fundamental creativity to transcend our conditioning and create miracles beyond what we think is reasonable and possible. We discovered that the currency that really measures value, and this is what we're moving towards, this is great news, is not so much material worth and value, money, but that our material value now becomes measured through well-being. The more well-being you have, the more well-being you experience, the more well-being you create in the world, the greater value you have and the greater connected you are to your own sense of value. We're not there yet. Obviously, you can't go to the grocery store right now and go, hey, I'm feeling good, give me some apples, right? We're not using it as a currency in the economy yet. But certainly I would say as the economy evolves, people who are in the business of creating well-being are well positioned on the leading edge of an evolving economy, and that ultimately that will be what we value the most. So I say to you right now, as we go through this transition, pay attention carefully to the businesses that are taking good care of their clients and their employees, because they're cultivating well-being. And while in the short run, that may be costly, in the long run, this is going to ensure their sustainability in the economy. That the businesses that take care of them, their employees and their clients are going to be the businesses that endure and last. And the businesses that are only focused on the bottom line will be the businesses that won't make it. We also see involved in this shift a willingness to embrace change, uncertainty, and to cultivate the growth of potential. So the currency of this modern era is well-being, which is why you being in a state of well-being is so important. If you're going to create well-being, you have to be well, and you have to live well. And that doesn't mean, opulence. That means in a state of sustainable energy, in a state that allows you to fully express who you are in the world. You will be creating more well-being when you be well, live well, and when you share your well-being with the world because you occupy your well-being. Well-being equals sustainability. When we are sustainable, we are activating our well-being. But unfortunately, most of us are taught that there's only one way to be successful and healthy. There's only one way to make a meaningful contribution. And as a result of that, we've learned over time to hide who we are, to compromise what we want, and give up what's most natural for us in order to try to fit into the formula. Here's the deal. It takes a lot of energy to maintain an identity that isn't true to who you are. Every time you say yes to something you really want to say no to, every time you try to be something or someone you're not, every time you make a choice that feels wrong, even though your logical mind is telling you, do it, right? Every time you give up a dream or a desire, or you nurture someone else at cost to yourself and choose circumstances that actually take you out of your joy and your authentic self, you're using an enormous amount of energy, enormous amount of willpower. When you use your vital life force energy to maintain a facade of inauthentic choices, you're going to eventually burn out and you'll sabotage everything in your life, sometimes including your health. And oftentimes that sabotage is there for a reason. It's that pain that we experience from not living true to who we are, whether that's physical pain, financial pain, relationship pain, spiritual pain. That pain is our barometer. It's a warning sign, and it's telling us, hey, warning, warning, you're disconnected from your authentic self. That pain is telling you that you're off course or you're living off your chart, and it's helping you realize that you need some serious course correction. What you're experiencing in your life right now is the sum total of every choice you've made in your life, and how you're hardwired energetically, your human design, is going to influence the kinds of choices that you make. And it's also going to show you how to make good choices that actually bring you back into alignment with your authentic self. So if you walk away with nothing today except for this, walk away with the understanding that one of the reasons why it's so important to follow your strategy by type is because it starts to bring you into alignment with living true to who you are. So where does integrity specifically live in the human design chart? It lives in the gate 26. The gate 26 is associated with the thymus gland, the immune system. It is part of what they call the channel of alignment, the 4426, which in traditional human design is called the channel of transmission. That channel of transmission has a purpose. First of all, it's part of the business circuitry, and this might not seem relevant, but roll with me on this for a minute. It's the place where we make a sale in business. It's the place where sales or transmission of a message happens in business. We go from looking at the patterns that people have, that's the gate 44. We discover what we can do to help people break free from patterns that are causing them pain or fear, and we meet them where they're at, and we give them solutions to transform that pain or fear into something of greater value and something that feels empowering. That's the true nature of what business is supposed to be like by design. Business is supposed to help people get out of pain or help them turn pain into power, suffering into something of a greater value, something that teaches them more about who they are and helps them find their purpose and their direction in life. Here's why we hate sales. Just a quick note. We hate sales because everything in the design chart is a theory and it's a possibility or an archetype, and it can go two ways, right? We can have this great, beautiful place where selling your services is actually service to humanity, right? You have something beautiful that you have to share with the world that you know is going to help people's lives. You have an obligation to sell it because people need it to transform, right? That's the high side of sales. Sales is love, right? The low side of it is you're questioning your own value. Maybe you're questioning the value of your product. Maybe you're questioning whether people are going to pay you for your product because you question your value so much. So you have to go through these elaborate hoops to try to convince people that, hey, I got what you got, I've got what you need, I'm going to help you. Here's, I'm going to give you all these promises that I might not be able to follow through on. And it feels skeezy because we feel out of integrity because we're out of alignment with our own value. When I do business coaching, the number one thing we do in business coaching to help people with sales is we work on your self-worth. Because the more you value what you bring to the table, the more you can confer value upon it, and the more you can stand behind your value, and ultimately, the more value you're able to give your clients. So it's a win-win-win-win-win to amp up your own value in business. Now, in a very primal level, if we look at the channel of alignment, it basically says we get into a state of integrity when we break free from the patterns of the past that are keeping us stuck in fear and pain. It's not natural for us to get stuck in fear and pain. When we look at the spleen center over on the left, this is a short-term reactive center. It gives us a pulse or information about something you need to do to keep yourself safe and alive. It is instinct, right? We can't live in instinct as human beings all the time. If you do, you'll stay in a constant state of cortisol and stress. You'll burn out in a massive way. And you won't be sustainable because your circuits will be fried and you'll be in an adrenal crisis and you'll be exhausted, right? So what the 26 says is that when we get out of the fear and the panic about our lives, this isn't about getting out of fear and panic of running from a bear. You can run from the bear. That's a good way to use your fear and panic, right? But if you're in fear and panic about your life, feeling inadequate, not thinking you have the right degree, not thinking you have the right people, you're freaking out about being on video in front of people on Zoom online because you've never done that before and this week you had to show up for work in front of people on a camera and that felt weird. You know, all of those things that can sometimes keep us in fear because being a human is complicated. The Channel 26 says being in alignment, being in integrity with who you are allows you to break free from those patterns. So you're not staying in a state of constant stress or the constant state of inadequacy because, or a fear of the past or a fear of the future or a fear of failing your responsibility or a fear of failing in general. It moves us out of that into a place of being confident and aligned with the value of who you are and the uncertain nature of what life brings. When you're connected with your authenticity and you're aligned with your authenticity, you become resilient and you're able to weather all the changes and the little fears and blips that come up. There are, in the human design chart, 5 kinds of integrity. These 5 kinds of integrity are rooted in the gate 26. The first kind of integrity is called physical integrity. That is, of course, being healthy and vital. If we are not healthy and vital, or something happens to our physical body, it puts us out of physical integrity. We have it, I'll call it a breach in integrity. And anytime you get a breach in integrity, not only does it obviously threaten your immune system potentially, it also has the potential to threaten our sense of worth and value. We tie our physicality so deeply to our sense of value that when something happens to our body, we risk also losing our connection to our self-worth and our sense of empowerment and control. I think this is so interesting, particularly when we start to look at this in the context, and I'm not trying to cut the guys out of the conversation, but especially for women here, right? Our sense of value is tied so deeply to how we look, how our body is, or how we are in our body. And when we are not showing up physically the way we're being told we should be, it can affect our sense of self-worth and be highly traumatic. And by the way, anytime we have any kinds of breaches in these 5 kinds of integrity, it can feel like and generate the symptoms of trauma. And I think that's a really, really important thing to understand, because trauma is I think a grossly undiagnosed or misdiagnosed experience in our culture. I think the numbers that we have about trauma are not big enough. According to research done by the Centers for Disease Control, 60% of people in America have experienced trauma. I really think that the numbers are more like 87 to 89%. And I think that the definition that we use of trauma isn't expansive enough. Trauma isn't just an event that threatens your life or your perceived life. It's not just an event of being sexually assaulted. It's also any event or experience or perception that causes us to lose connection with our sense of value, our lovability, and our right place in the world. The second kind of breach of integrity is what I'll call a resource integrity. Resource integrity is about having enough stuff, having enough food, money, shelter, whatever it is that we're using as the metric of enoughness. When we lose connection to our resources, it can be traumatic and impact our integrity. And certainly I would say at this time right now, this is a place where we are potentially vulnerable as we go through this not only potential breach in our physical integrity, but also a time when there's a lot of uncertainty around material resources. And certainly I would say that for all of us, it's a very important time to take stock of what we do have. And I really, last night on the Understanding Human Design Community Open Call, we have an online community. And in our online community, we meet and have live calls a couple of times a month. And they're always really amazing and inspiring because our community members are just mind-blowing. But one of our community members is exploring creating an online community where people can come together and start talking about what do you need and facilitating for each other what people need on either a material way, a material plane, or even in an energetic way. This experience that we're having right now, I think, is giving us a really profound way to redefine what resources do we need and I'm emphasizing need when I say that, and also exploring how do we better share the resources that we have. Remember this will center energy and the resources of the will are resources that are designed for sharing. We are designed to share as part of sustainability. And the more we have, and the more we have to give, actually, the more we shore up our integrity. And in fact, research shows that being generous, giving to others, actually increases your immune response, which I think is pretty cool. So certainly I would say it's hard to not fall into fear around money and resources and a changing economy. And I would like to also encourage you all to explore and take stock of what you do have, and to also explore and contemplate what you have to share, because we all also have things that we can share with each other, and to use this as a catalyst for beginning to explore ways in which we can better share the resources we have. You know, there is, and I actually find this, this is not meant to be a downer, but I actually find this to be a very uplifting thought. But there's a lot of data that says that we actually have the ability to feed everyone on the planet, but that the only problem is not so much having the resources, but the distribution of the resources. And I think distribution of resources is probably a pretty easy problem to solve. I think that's way easier than trying to figure out how to create the resources anyway. The third kind of integrity is identity integrity. And this is the one that I really want to encourage you all to also contemplate and explore while we're in this pause that we're experiencing right now. Anytime we try to be something that we're not, or someone that we're not, anytime we think we can't be valuable being who we are, or we can't get resources for ourselves being ourselves because we are believing the lie that somehow we're inherently not valuable as our authentic selves, it causes us to lose energy. It causes us to have a breach in integrity. And as I said, ultimately, it actually also impacts the immune system. We are healthier and our immune systems are bolstered when we have a purpose and we understand the meaning of our lives and we embrace the value of who we are individually as a person, as a story. You're a story, right? You're a soul living in a story. When you can understand the value of that story and not compromise on who you are, you get healthier. You increase your immune response. You increase your resiliency. And ultimately, you give yourself more meaning and more drive and more of an ability to get up and keep going, even when things seem a little challenging. Moral integrity happens when we think we are not enough. And because we think we're not enough, we think we have to resort to sneaky methods of taking more than our share, toilet paper maybe, because we're afraid we won't have enough, and we don't trust source, and we don't trust the value of who we are, most importantly. And so we think we have to somehow manipulate or be duplicitous in conferring upon ourselves resources. The last kind of integrity, and this is a big one, and this is one I think is a chronic issue for our world, is we get out of energetic integrity when we commit to doing something that we don't have the energy for, when we neglect to take care of ourselves, when we neglect to rest, when we neglect to be generous with ourselves, when we put ourselves in an internal environment that's self-deprecating or isn't lifting us up, when we start doing chatter in our head that's not supportive, that doesn't speak to the value of who we are, we deplete our energetic resources. And because in our culture we have, probably because of materialistic consciousness that says the more you have, the more valuable you are, we have created this artificial idea that when you're working, you're being productive and valuable, and when you're resting, you're lazy. Remember when we went back to the very beginning of this presentation, it is hardwired into all of us that we need rest. And we need cycles of rest and consistent cycles of rest. And rest doesn't mean you take the day off to clean your house. That's not resting. That's working in your house. That means you take the time off to unplug, maybe electronically for some of you, maybe that's resting, but you get out of the cycle of work and you replenish your energy resources by sleeping, by hanging out on the couch with a romance novel, by going for a walk, by connecting, maybe not physically right now, but virtually with your loved ones. You talk, you restore yourself. And here's the key. People always ask me, well, how do you know what rest is? Here's what rest is. It's anything you do that replenishes your energy stores. So if you are resting, but you are not feeling rested at the end of your rest because you've been laying on the couch freaking out the whole day, right? Worrying, that's not resting. Worrying is not restorative. Resting means you are resourcing yourself. And honestly, the best way to resource, and we see this in the design of the Will Center through the 51, we resource ourselves when we use our rest as a time to reconnect spiritually, to recharge our battery, to replenish our energy source. And the real measurement for each and every one of you, because it's going to be unique for each and every one of you, the real measurement of rest and restoration and taking care of your energetic integrity is going to be if at the end of the rest you feel regenerated, then it was restful. But if you're laying there all day watching Netflix, which I heard, I guess they slowed down this starting today. If you're watching Netflix all day and you get up off of the bed and you're like, and you don't feel good, that wasn't rest. That was avoidance. That was you subjugating your anxiety. That's different than rest. And it's really important to recognize that rest has to be restful. You have to feel rested at the end. You have to feel restocked, restored, replenished, renourished, recharged, ready to go again. And if you don't, then rest some more until you get that rest thing handled. There is a certain blessing in this experience that we're having that is kind of an enforced rest cycle. And I really want to encourage you all, for the sake of stabilizing your integrity and enhancing your immune response, to use this as a time to catch up on that rest that maybe you haven't been taking for a long, long time. As I said, anytime we have a breach in integrity, we get trauma. I'll skip through the whole trauma thing because I already did it. Last but not least, I just want to leave you with this. And I'm just going to zip through this pretty quickly, mostly because I really I want you to just contemplate this, because there are some keys in the gates of the Will Center that give us insights into pathways of beginning the process of recalibrating our sense of value. And in the next few slides, and if you have the slide handouts, you can print these off and just work with these affirmations. There's some affirmations that I want to invite you to explore. So I apologize, I'm going to whip through these kind of quickly, but take these into contemplation and meditation this next week. The first pathway to restoring, restocking, replenishing, and staying in a state of energy, meaning you've got energy in your Will Center bank, is to also stay in a state of self-management or self-regulation. It's very easy in the cycle that we're in to just live in pajamas, blow off the time-space continuum, and get out of any kind of rhythm and order. It's also really easy to begin to question our value and who we are when we're in isolation, right? So this gate actually tells us that to stay restocked, replenished, restored, nourished, and to have energy, we have to regulate ourselves. This is the energy that's oftentimes associated with budgeting. I want you to budget the way in which you take care of yourself during this time. You have the ability to control your thoughts and actions. You don't have to be in control of anyone else, even if you're in the house with them, maybe the kids and the dogs. But I want you to use this affirmation. I use my energy to manage myself and trust that the universe will supply all the serendipitous encounters and magic necessary for me to sustain myself in every way. The concept that I want you to understand that the 21 brings us is the concept of self-generosity, that we have built into our energy field the ability to give to ourselves freely. And that is really the key element of self-regulation. That when we can give to ourselves freely and stay in a state of self-generosity, meaning we're creating an inner as well as an outer environment that supports us and lifts us up, it creates sustainability in our will, and it gives us the energy to endure and sustain as we go through this experience. The gate 40 is called higher will. Sometimes it's an alone gate. It's a need for retreat and renewal in order to create healthy relationship agreements. Tricky to get when you're living in a house full of people, but here's the piece. This gate 40 says, I am a powerful being who honors my need for rest and renewal in order for me to fully be present to all of our relationships. When we are taking care of ourselves, when we're honoring ourselves and our own needs, then we sustain our energy, and ultimately in our relationships especially, then we have more energy available for others. We're not projecting onto other people that they should be filling our need for self-care or our need for self-honor or our self-generosity. We're not asking our partners to fill our energy bank in our will center. When we can take the pause and fill up our own energy reserves, then we have more available not only for ourselves, but more available for the people that we need to be available for during this time. Authenticity, as I said, is being authentic, being aligned with who we are. We talked a little bit about that already. Your mantra here is, I speak and act with authentic integrity, and I share my heart freely. My words and choices are representations of my heart and my value. I claim and defend my value, meaning you set good boundaries for yourself. And my choices, words, and actions claim and defend my value and honor the value of others. And last but not least, the 51, these kinds of shocking, disruptive experiences are potentially initiating. And as we go through this change and we start to really recalibrate what's coming up next and where we are in this huge transformation we're potentially going through, your mantra here is, I am courageous, steadfast, and open to the expression of spirit through me. I use all of my life experience as catalysts to help me grow and evolve, and that while we're in this process, we don't slide into victimhood, but instead see that there's an opportunity here for us to grow and evolve, and that we begin to embrace genuine humility, which is the recognition that you have a unique role in the evolution of humanity, and you have a vital and irreplaceable place in divine order, and that you take up your right place in the cosmic plan. And that might be resting, restocking, replenishing yourself. That might mean now is the time for those of you perhaps who feel like you have a message or a voice or leadership, a role of leadership to take as the world goes through this tremendous change. Now is the time for you to do it. It's the call for you to come out and be the fulfillment of the story of who you are. In traditional human design, when we look at the will center, we say the will center is driven by a need to prove itself and its value. Certainly, I would encourage you to ask yourself, are you doing anything to try to prove your value? Or have you created a life in the past that was based on your need to prove your value? If you have, be done with it, because you're valuable because you exist. That's the only criteria for being valuable. Your existence makes you valuable. In the quantum human design, we say that the quantum purpose of the will center is to align with sustainability, community, truth with a capital T, and value. And I call the center in quantum human design the resource center. I have, if you haven't seen it yet, a brand new course that I'm offering. It's a 6-part home study video plus 4 hours of a virtual online retreat, so we can all hang out together, called the Integrity Course. In this course, you're going to experience greater levels of physical well-being. You're going to learn how to create a deeper sense of value and purpose. You're going to gain the ability to take concrete steps towards creating what you want in your life. You're going to get the experience of the ability to be more sustainable in life. You're going to learn how to renew your energy and your drive. You're going to learn how to create healthier relationships that honor who you are and create greater fulfillment and ease. You're going to learn how to identify where you might have breaches in integrity that are impacting your life. You're going to learn about how your human design influences your integrity. You're going to learn about your unique energy needs based on your chart and how they influence your relationships and what you need to restock, restore, replenish your own energy. You're going to learn how to increase your self-worth and sense of value. You're going to learn how to set better boundaries and take better care of yourself. how to cultivate a deeper understanding of your human design chart, and how to create a deeper connection that causes you to take right actions to live in your purpose. This program comes with 6 home study videos and homework to help you facilitate how to live in integrity. We got a Facebook page for this class where you can join us for watch parties and Facebook Lives while we share our insights with each other. You're also going to get access to all of the human design types class, so you can go deep into understanding your type and start really living according to your strategy and bring yourself back into integrity. And as I said, on Sunday, April the 4th, we're going to have a 4-hour virtual retreat where we're going to explore the themes we cover in the program together online. This class is on a sliding scale. I know that right now we are in this huge time of uncertainty, and I don't want to exclude anybody from this information. So Cindy's going to post for you guys in the chat, and later on, if you're watching the replay below, you'll see the post for the PayPal link. Just pay whatever you can afford and join us so that you can really gain access to this important information that's going to help you live in closer alignment with who you truly are. Also, just again, reminder, for the month of March, our human design online community is only $27 a month. The price goes up on April 1st. When you join the community, you get access to every general human design class that I've ever taught. So it's kind of like getting an all access pass to learning more about your human design. These courses are no longer available anywhere else but in the membership. If you had purchased all of those courses individually, you would easily spend more than $1,000. This is a really great way to get access to these courses. And I think most importantly, it's a really great way to get access to what I find to be personally one of the most loving, nurturing, uplifting, beautiful communities I've ever been a part of. We meet regularly live online. We've got an active, thriving Facebook group. We have a great opportunity to learn from each other and to live in a community that understands the nature of your design. So you get to live true to who you are, and you get to hang out with people who really understand your human design speak. If you want to learn more about the community, it's understandinghumandesign.com. And again, remember that the cost of the membership is going up on April 1st, so get in on the $27 a month. The $27 a month monthly subscription. So awesome. All right, 7 minutes over. Ooh, we were a little long today. Thank you all for hanging with me and being so patient. Thoughts, comments, and questions? Cindy?
No, I was just seeing, Candace said great. Oh, here we go, something coming in. No, thank you. Candace said, great to see you're feeling good. You've been in her prayers. Thanks for the great words today.
Thank you. Candace.
Other than that, but just thank you.
Awesome. So yes, we'll post a replay. Hopefully tomorrow. Zoom is being very slow about getting their videos posted because I think they're probably scrambling like crazy. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Cindy, as always, for riding Side Saddle. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all next week. Rest, you guys. Rest, restore, restock, replenish, renew, etc. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.